We all know the story of Pandora's box. A single woman, a sealed container, a moment of curiosity that shattered the world. Hope trapped inside, suffering released forever. It is the myth we were taught to remember, the moment when humanity fell. But what if that story is incomplete? What if Pandora was not the beginning, but the excuse? Long before the box, before Olympus ruled the sky, before names like Zeus, Eden, or creation were ever spoken, humanity had already crossed a line. Not a line guarded by gods, but one woven into the fabric of existence itself. The first transgressions were not accidents, they were choices. Choices to know what was forbidden, to claim power never meant to be held, to step beyond our place in the cosmic order. These stories appear again and again in the oldest civilizations on Earth. Different gods, different names, the same warning. Tonight, we travel back before Pandora, before the box, before the punishment, before the blame. To the first acts of defiance whispered across civilizations, to the primal moments when humanity reached too far. Welcome to Pre-Pandora's box, unearthing the terrifying first human transgressions. The very first human transgression is said to have happened at the beginning of time in a place called Eden. Eden was a perfect garden. Adam and Eve lived there together. There was no hunger, no sickness, and no death. They did not struggle to survive. Everything they needed was already provided. In the middle of the garden stood a special tree, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. God told them they could eat from any tree they wished except this one. The story says the tree bore fruit, but the fruit itself was not the true danger. What made the tree forbidden was what it gave. It gave understanding. As long as Adam and Eve stayed away from the tree, they lived simply. They followed God's guidance. They did not question it. They did not judge their actions or themselves. They lived like children, safe, protected, and unaware of consequence. Then came the moment of choice. When Eve reached for the fruit and Adam ate it with her, something changed. They crossed a line they could not see. They did not just break a rule. They chose to decide for themselves. The moment they ate, the world around them stayed the same. The garden was still beautiful. The sky did not fall. But inside them, everything was different. For the first time, they felt shame. For the first time, they saw themselves clearly. They understood that their actions had meaning and consequences. They were no longer innocent, not because they became evil, but because they became aware. When they were sent away from Eden, it was not only a punishment, it was the result of what they had become. They could no longer live in a place without pain, because they now understood right and wrong. They could no longer live without responsibility. From that moment on, humanity would have to make choices and live with the results of those choices. Life outside Eden was harder, but it was also real. The first human transgression was not simple curiosity. It was the decision to stand on one's own, to choose, to judge, to know. Something precious was lost that day, but something powerful was born. And every human story since then carries the echo of that first bite. When humanity left Eden, the stories did not end, they changed. Far from the gardens of the Bible, in the ancient lands of Sumer, people told another story about the beginning of human loss. This story was not about a forbidden tree, it was about leaving the natural world behind. Enkidu was created to be a wild man. He lived on the open plains. He ran with the animals. He drank from the rivers. He did not rule nature, he belonged to it. The animals trusted him, the land accepted him. There was no wall between Enkidu and the world around him. To the Sumerians, this was what humanity once was, strong, free, and in balance with the earth. But Enkidu was never meant to remain that way. When he is brought into human society, he is taught to eat bread instead of grass. He drinks wine instead of water. He learns to wear clothes. He learns how to speak like a man of the city. And in learning these things, he gains something. He gains knowledge. He gains strength. He gains purpose. But he also loses something. When Enkidu returns to the plains, the animals no longer come near him. They sense the change. They run from him. The bond is broken. From that moment on, Enkidu is no longer part of nature. He stands apart from it. This is how civilization is born in the Sumerian story, not as a victory, not as progress, but as separation. Humanity steps out of the wild and builds walls. It farms the land. It tames animals. It reshapes the earth to serve its needs. The first transgression here is not against the gods. It is against balance. It is the choice to control the world instead of living within it. Like Adam and Eve, Enkidu cannot return to what he was. Once the knowledge of civilization is gained, innocence is gone. And just as Eden closed its gates, nature too pulls away. These ancient stories carry the same warning. The moment humans choose power over belonging, something precious is lost, and the distance between humanity and the world it lives in begins to grow. As humans moved farther from nature, the stories grew darker. In ancient Egypt, the danger was no longer knowledge or civilization, it was pride. The Egyptians believed that the sun god Ra was the ruler of the world. His light gave warmth, his light made crops grow, his light kept life moving. As long as Ra ruled directly, the world remained in balance. But the stories say that one day humanity began to change. People grew restless, they grew bold. They began to believe they no longer needed the gods. In secret, they plotted against Ra himself. This was not an act of hunger or survival. It was an act of arrogance. Humanity was no longer content to live under the order of the universe. It wanted to challenge it. When Ra learned of the rebellion, his response was swift and terrifying. He sent destruction upon humanity. The punishment was so severe that even Ra began to regret it. The message was delivered, but at a terrible cost. After this, Ra made a decision that would shape the world forever. He withdrew. Ra pulled away from direct rule and rose into the sky. The gods followed. From that moment on, the divine no longer walked openly among humans. The world was still lit by the sun, but it was more distant. Order remained, but it was no longer protected. Humanity was left to govern itself under a colder sky. In the Egyptian story, the great transgression is not disobedience, it is overconfidence, the belief that humans could replace the forces that created them. And the punishment is not destruction alone, it is abandonment. When humans challenge the cosmic order, the gods do not always strike. Sometimes they simply step away, and when they do, the world becomes quieter, harsher, and far more dangerous. By the time the gods had stepped back from the world, humanity was no longer innocent. Humans now lived outside Eden. They were separated from nature. They stood beneath distant gods. They struggled. They suffered. And they were afraid. In Greek myth, this is when Prometheus appears. Prometheus was not human. He was a titan, older than the gods of Olympus. He understood both divine power and human weakness. Unlike the gods, Prometheus felt sympathy for humans. He saw them living in darkness, cold, helpless, at the mercy of nature and the will of the gods. Fire existed, but it belonged only to the heavens. Without it, humans could not shape the world. They could not protect themselves. They could not remember, build, or grow. Fire was not just warmth. Fire meant tools. It meant cooking food. It meant hardening clay and shaping metal. It meant light in the darkness and safety in the night. Fire meant the beginning of knowledge. When Prometheus stole fire from the gods and gave it to humanity, he did more than offer help. He broke a sacred boundary. The gods had kept fire to themselves for a reason. It was power, and power was never meant to be shared. With fire, humans were no longer helpless. They could change their environment. They could create weapons. They could build cities. They could challenge the world instead of enduring it. Prometheus did not simply raise humanity up. He armed it, and the gods understood the danger immediately. For this act, Prometheus was punished. He was chained to a mountain, unable to escape. Each day, an eagle tore into his body and ate his liver. Each night, it grew back, only for the pain to begin again. The punishment never ended. This was not just revenge. It was a warning. Progress would always come with suffering. Every step forward would demand a price. With fire, humanity gained power, but also responsibility. The same flame that warms can burn.
The same tool that builds can destroy. From this moment on, human history becomes a balance between creation and catastrophe. The gods did not take fire back. They allowed humanity to keep it. But the message was clear. Knowledge cannot be unlearned. Power cannot be returned. And once humanity was given the means to shape the world, there was no turning back. Fire became the symbol of human rebellion, not a rebellion of anger, but of survival. And from its first spark, progress was born in pain. Suffering would walk beside humanity from that day forward. When these stories are placed side by side, a pattern begins to appear. Different lands, different gods, different names, but the same moment told again and again. Someone reaches for what is forbidden. Someone takes power that was not meant to be taken. A rule older than humanity is broken. In Eden, it was knowledge. In Sumer, it was the choice to leave nature behind. In Egypt, it was the belief that humans could replace the gods. In Greece, it was fire. Each story describes a different act, but they all lead to the same result. Humanity changes. The world does not end. The sky does not collapse. Instead, life becomes more complicated. With every forbidden gift comes progress, and with every step forward comes loss. These myths are not telling humans to remain ignorant. They are not warnings against learning or growth. They are warnings about cost. Every form of knowledge brings responsibility. Every form of power brings consequences. Once something is known, it cannot be unknown. Once power is gained, it cannot be given back. These ancient stories understood something deeply human. The danger is not learning. The danger is believing knowledge comes without consequence. The first transgressions were not mistakes. They were trade-offs. Humanity gained awareness, strength, and control, but lost innocence, balance, and closeness to the sacred. And this pattern does not belong to the past. It continues quietly in every age. Because every time humanity reaches for more, the question is never, can we, but what will it cost?
As humanity gained more knowledge and power, a new fear emerged. Not fear of the gods, not fear of nature, but fear of the future. In Norse mythology, the greatest force in the universe is not a god, it is fate. Fate is alive. It is woven by three beings known as the Norns at the roots of the great world tree, Yggdrasil. Their threads decide every life, human and god alike. No one escapes the pattern. In this world, the transgression is not stealing fire or breaking a rule. It is the need to know what comes next. Humans look for signs. They ask seers and prophets. They try to read the threads of fate before they are finished. But to see the future is to want to change it, and every attempt to escape fate only pulls the threads tighter. Even the gods cannot resist this desire. Odin sacrifices his eye for wisdom. He searches endlessly for knowledge of what is to come, and what he learns fills him with fear. He sees the end, the fall of the gods, the burning of the world, Ragnarok. From that moment on, every action becomes an attempt to delay the inevitable. But the Norse stories teach a cruel lesson. Knowing fate does not grant control. It only makes the ending unavoidable. In trying to avoid destruction, the gods unknowingly walk straight toward it. The Norse transgression is not rebellion, it is obsession, the belief that knowing the future can save us. Instead, it traps us. And in the end, fate does not change, it fulfills itself. If the Norse stories warn about knowing the future, the Dreamtime stories warn about forgetting the past. In Aboriginal Dreamtime, the world is not something humans own, it is something they belong to. In the beginning, ancestral beings traveled across the land. As they moved, they shaped rivers, mountains, animals, and people. Their actions created laws that held the world together. These laws were not written in books, they lived in the land itself. As long as humans followed these sacred laws, the world remained in balance. The rivers flowed, animals thrived, the seasons came as they should. But when humans broke these laws, the land responded. The stories say the earth began to suffer, water dried up,
Animals disappeared. The ground cracked. This was not punishment sent from the sky. There was no angry god striking humanity down. The world simply fell out of balance. In Dreamtime stories, wrongdoing is not about good or evil. It is about disruption. When humans forget their place in the world remembers. The dream, the living memory of creation, begins to break apart. And once the dream is damaged, its effects do not end with one generation. The imbalance spreads. It echoes across time. The lesson is clear and simple. When humans break the sacred relationship with the land breaks back. Not in anger, but in consequence. And unlike other myths, there is no final punishment, no ending that resets the world. Only the long, quiet cost of imbalance, felt by those who come after.
Across all these stories, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. The ancient myths were never really about gods. They were about us, about the same hopes and fears that still shape human life today. In Eden, humans reached for knowledge. In Sumer, they stepped away from nature. In Egypt, they challenged the order of the universe. In Greece, they took fire from the heavens. In the north, they searched for the future. In Dreamtime, they broke their bond with the land. Different stories, the same human impulse, the desire to know more, to control more, to go further than before. These myths were warnings, not because progress is evil, but because progress is never neutral. Every gain carries a cost. Today, the gods no longer sit on mountains or walk among us, but the choices remain the same. We split the atom, unlocking power once reserved for stars. We dig into the earth, burning what took millions of years to form. We reshape rivers, forests, and skies to suit our needs. We rewrite the code of life itself. Each breakthrough feels necessary. Each step forward feels justified. And like the stories before us, the consequences do not arrive all at once. They arrive slowly. In rising temperatures, in silent forests, in weapons that can end the world in a moment. Every age has its Pandora. Not a box made of wood or gold, but systems, machines, and discoveries we do not fully understand. The box was never the danger. The danger was the belief that nothing inside could harm us. It was the hand reaching forward, convinced it had the right. The ancient stories ask us the same question they always have. Not can we do this, but should we? And whether, this time, we will recognize the moment before the lid opens again. The first human transgressions were not accidents. They were not misunderstandings. They were choices. Choices made again and again across time and cultures. The choice to know what was hidden. The choice to challenge limits. The choice to become more than we were. In every story, humanity gains something valuable: knowledge, power, freedom. And in every story, something is lost: innocence, balance, closeness to the world that created us. The ancient myths do not ask why humanity fell. They already know the answer. Humanity did not fall because it was weak. It fell because it was curious, because it refused to remain small. These stories were never meant to stop progress. They were meant to slow it down, to remind us that every step forward reshapes the world and reshapes us with it. Today, we stand where our ancestors once stood, at the edge of new knowledge, new power, new possibilities. The tools are different, the scale is larger, the consequences are greater, but the choice is the same. Every discovery asks something in return. Every advance carries a shadow. The question these myths leave us with is not simple. It is not, what will we gain? It is, what are we willing to sacrifice? And when the next box opens, not in myth, but in reality, will we recognize it? Or will we reach out, as we always have, believing this time will be different?
Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe.